Evening all on PlayChess and also streaming to YouTube. Okay. Hi all. Starting officially in 30 seconds actually on YouTube. I'm a bit early. So we'll just wait 30 seconds for a moment. And okay, I hope everyone's okay. 15 seconds. Oh, I think it's actually started now. Right. Okay, this week I thought we could continue looking at that amazing Chess Olympiad. Unfortunately, a couple of people died at the end of it. It really saddened me to hear that news. It was reported in a lot of news sources. I don't know if it was related to the exhaustion, I don't know, of the event. It was a grueling event, I expect, for anyone playing in it. And so rest in peace those two players. Unfortunately, that one was from the Seychelles team, and sorry I don't have the names offhand. I wasn't really going to talk about that, but yeah, if this session here this week goes back to round 7 actually. In round 7 there were some very interesting games, and let's have a look at them. So I've got a group of 5 or 6 of what I consider quite interesting games. The first one, Magnus Carlsen, very high profile game, of course, with the world champion, and he was playing against Naiditsch with the white pieces. So Naiditsch is, top German Grandmaster 2709. Let's see what happened in that game. So d4 from Magnus, and Naiditsch responded with knight f6. I'll put on live book here, and the game continued. c4, e6, inviting Nimzo Indian if knight c3, and Magnus did actually play that. Knight c3, bishop b4, knight f3. A little bit rare, knight f3, usually e3 or queen c2. These are quite popular here. So knight f3 with the third choice, c5, and now Magnus plays g3. There's quite a lot of games with this continuation. Black castled, bishop g2, c takes d4, knight takes d4, d5, quite theoretical, c takes, knight takes, queen b3, knight c6. I just want to get past the opening. Okay, so knight takes c6, b takes c6, but we could say something here. Is this a good point to start chatting about the game? I'll put on Stockfish here. What's the evaluation? It's a small advantage right now for Magnus Carlsen. He castled here, and now we see queen a5, which actually okay, so putting pressure on c3. And also this bishop a6 is potentially annoying on this diagonal. So this bishop's kind of blunted by this huge knight on d5. Magnus played knight e4 here. And it seems, well, from the engine perspective, black's doing okay here. But it depends, this c6 pawn could be a liability on that c file. But does black have enough piece play? He plays bishop a6. And the queen comes back protecting e2. Now we see h6. Was there actually an invisible threat here? Let's hold on, let's see. Maybe there's a kind of potential idea of knight g5, but the engine's not really picking up on that as a threat or anything. So, but anyway, we see h6. And now a3. And the bishop drops back. b4. Okay, so in this position you might think there's a pin here. This is not so hot. Bishop takes b4. There's bishop. Well, actually, there's even the strongest actually here is just taking that And then here, apparently this is quite good for bishop b2, queen here, and knight d2. So white's threatening rook a1 to trap the queen. So it seems as though this is unpleasant for black. If knight takes b4, queen c3, that's a bit of a sharp line really. And white apparently ends up better after all this, taking on b4. So it's a bit of a long line from this b4. In the game actually, okay, so bishop takes b4 wasn't played. It's interesting. Queen b5 was played. And so more pressure on e2, that's protected. Queen c4. And now Magnus keeps the queens on with queen b2. c5, trying to get rid of that potential target, that c pawn. Magnus takes that. We have that releases control of the f6 square. So bishop f6. But this is all okay after queen a2. Interesting. So what's happening here? Why can't black take the exchange? Let's have a look. If bishop takes a1, apparently this is really good for white. Queen takes a1. Apparently this is evaluated as very, very good for white. I think, yeah, there's ideas of e4 and bishop f1, for example, immediately, which is dangerous for black. Let's give black a move. Let's say here, bishop f1. How is this good for white? e4. Apparently it's good for white anyway. So that exchange wasn't taken. After queen a2, black actually played rook ac8, and now we have e4. Okay, knight c3. At this point, white's technically doing okay. It seems actually significantly better from an engine point of view. It's an advantage for white. White actually takes the queens off, bishop takes, and plays e5, so liberating his bishop. There's a 2-to-1 pawn majority here. The knight's a bit fragile though, bishop e7, looking at the knight. We see bishop d2. Let's see if the knight, could the knight actually go somewhere? Apparently, well, bishop e3 might be good, or knight b7. So Magnus played this, bishop d2. And now we see check, knight d4. So here again, white's doing well, quite well. How many of you have seen this game before? Sorry, this was in round 7. Has everyone seen this game? Could you just let me know? I'm just curious if you've seen this game before or not. If you could just let me know. So rook ac1 was played, and the bishop went to d5. And actually, here is where black got something quite dangerous going from this bishop d5. Magnus actually took that bishop, and it gives black, in theory, a passed pawn. But at this stage, there's a lot of play in the position. But it's interesting to see what happens with that d pawn here. Knight d7 might not be the most accurate move. Actually, rook ed1. Apparently, this is quite good, and threatening to take here. So what would black do here? It looks as though maybe this is annoying, but white's doing okay. Okay, so knight d7, and black took on c1. Rook takes c1. Rook d8, getting behind that potentially dangerous passed pawn. Knight c5. Now black just took on c5, and here this pawn could be blockaded. If b takes, then knight c6 blocks white's pawn. puts pressure on e5, and this pawn's ready to roll as well. But also black's got rook b8 coming up, which is potentially quite dangerous. If white takes the time for f4, then rook b8. It looks as though black's okay here. So Magnus avoided b takes. Hi there, I just want to make sure the chat's okay as well. So he actually played rook takes c5. Okay, and we see now knight f3. And interesting, so we've got this pawn is starting to look a little bit more dangerous. And here though, Magnus played bishop c3. I did a bit of analysis on this earlier. Apparently this is approaching near equality bishop c3. Apparently the engine suggests in this position, this is potentially troublesome pass pawn here, that the engine suggests bishop f4 in this position. You see white's got this king g2 all the time, so if g5 we play king g2 here, and apparently this is okay. Check, we can play this, and in this position this is the bishop can drop here, and this is okay apparently for white, even after losing that one. The king's central here, and white should be okay. That sort of continuation, but it starts to be, Magnus starts to get in big trouble. He doesn't actually play bishop f4, he plays bishop c3 instead. And I think the temptation here for d4 is basically refuted. If d4, this would have been a blunder, I think, because of this king g2, because the knight can't go to e1, we've got it covered, and if the knight, you know, moves, then we got a nice blockade here of that pawn, and we can, you know, use the 2 to 1 here. So that would be a mistake, but black instead reinforces the knight now. Great move, g5, to try and reinforce this knight with g4, because the knight's still facilitating the pawn coming down, so it becomes a dangerous position now. Black's got a little bit of chance with this d pawn to generate some trouble. Magnus stops, tries to discourage g4, he plays h3, and now h5. This knight's going to be entrenched. King g2, g4. Okay, so we see now b5, opening up the a5 square, potentially is quite useful. Rook d7, check, bishop a5, but now the d pawn is pushed, and here white's still okay apparently. H takes, but here is where the advantage has actually changed hands. The advantage actually changes hands here. Apparently this should be played, rook c7, and a little bit tricky for black what to do. If we go to try and run with this pawn here, king f1, knight d4, threatening d2 because that knight's cut off at e2, so we go here, but then knight takes b5 should be equal. This position here should be, apparently it's equal. The black king actually looks to be the higher quality king, but it doesn't matter. This should be equal, this position. It should be, maybe in theory, maybe it should be a draw. But what happened in this position was quite interesting. On move 38, so I guess this is approaching the 40 move time control, Magnus actually played e6. He played e6, which I guess forces off the rooks because of this 7th rank consideration, trying to knock out that pawn. There's no real choice here. I mean, you don't want to do this because, well, rook c7 is even worse. Takes this is no good. This position for black. We've got this 2 to 1 here. These pawns start getting pushed. No, so basically black took immediately. There's no point otherwise. Take immediately. Rook c7. No, it looks a little bit similar to that. This is quite different actually. Now, this position here, black takes on c7 and plays d3 here. Okay, so king f1, knight d4, threatening d2, and we're on b5 pawn. King e1, black took on b5, and black's in the driving seat here. He's just forked the bishop and the pawn. Black's actually doing very well. These pawns are on light squares away from that bishop, so Magnus is in a bad way here. Knight takes, and in this position, actually it seems as though bishop takes a7 would lose here. Can you see why this loses? What would you play here with black? Why is this absolutely, it seems absolutely losing for white? So what does black play here, do you think? Does anyone have any ideas here? What do you play with black? This is just a variation anyway. But black's apparently knight c4. It just the pawn's not going anywhere. I think the king just comes up here, and we get this sort of position where white's just waiting to lose. Basically, the king just comes in too strongly. It's hopeless. This ending becomes hopeless. This sort of thing. So we go with this e3 is eventually winning. It's weakening g3. So white is in big trouble. He doesn't take on a7. He plays king d2. So taking the opportunity to knock this pawn out. Okay, but that leaves black with the a pawn. So there's a downside of that as well. This a pawn. So taking that d pawn out though. But black still is in the driving seat. Black's slightly better here. Now this might be an inaccuracy. King e4. This a pawn is now dangerous. Bishop e5. I think now it's getting really critical again. King f4. I think Carlsen Miller, on ChessBase mentioned some analysis of this position, as though it might still be possible to draw this. But it looks extremely tricky. Or it might have been actually earlier to this position. No, actually it might actually be this position with f3. It might still be possible to draw with f3 apparently. Takes, so like this. Apparently this is close to, this looks close to drawing. An opportunity potentially to draw. There's a g4 resource. Okay, so this might be the actual losing move now. King f4 at move 49. This could be the losing move. King h5, f3. But now this is not good here. This f3 because of e5 check. Oh dear. So if bishop takes, then knight takes, and we just take on here. So one of these pawns is queening. So e5, great move. King e4, and now knight d6 check again with the same sort of idea that this would be lethal for white if he took on e5. So king e3, but now king g5. Okay, and there's some other tricks now here. If bishop takes e5, then check. We'll be taking this bishop and this pawn's running. So after king g5, Magnus plays fg. If he plays f4 check, I don't think this helps either. E takes, g takes, king f5. We've got this pass pawn here. Two pass pawns is really too much, I think. So fg is played. Now e4, and black is just winning this position now. The king is making progress eventually. King's coming in eventually. White's 2 pawns down now and could resign, and resigns here. So Yeah, it was an interesting game that Magnus rarely loses, so it's very interesting from that point of view. Now, the next few games I have are more hack attack games, actually. So they kind of, I found them quite interesting, very interesting from the attacking perspectives. So let's have a look now. So this, again, all in round 7. This all happened in round 7. Let's have a look at Dominguez Perelenia 2760 against Mamedyarov, Shakira Mamedyarov. So it was a Sicilian defence. Dominguez Pere playing white, played e4. I think the Cuban team against Azerbaijan, I think. So c5 from Mamedyarov, and we have an open Sicilian. Okay, so we get an open Sicilian. Very exciting start position with a6. I kind of like these positions. Okay, so white plays now f3. This looks like an English attack structure. So it was popularised by a lot of English grandmasters, I think the 70s, 80s. So it used to be just used against the Sicilian dragon, but became popular against other setups that black could use. It deprives that g4 square from black, and white can still play like this, as though playing against the Sicilian dragon. So we see queen b6, okay, at least trying to discourage this bishop move, tying down to b2. Interesting move. Okay, so white now, in live book, what is white supposed to do? Apparently knight b3 is quite popular, 145 games, or g4. In the game we see g4, knight c6, the knight goes back now, e6, queen e2, so being able to play bishop e3 to kick that queen, queen c7, queen drops back, bishop e3, b5, and now white castles queenside. So it looks like a fun position to have for both sides. Knight d7 was played. Queen f2, so depriving this sort of thing. Knight b6 is being deprived from black. That could have been handy, I think. Or knight c5 maybe is discouraged as well. There's more pressure on these two key squares here now. Okay, knight c e5. King goes to b1. Bishop e7, and we see now rook g1. So if black dares castle kingside here, let's see what would happen. Well, black didn't castle, but I think this is potentially quite interesting, this g5. And then we could continue with f4 and maybe f5, f6 even. So black didn't want that in particular. He played actually g5. Interesting move, g5. So this dark square grip with this knight on e5, it's an interesting construction here. White immediately doesn't mind sacking a pawn. If black takes this now, then that would liberate white's position dramatically. I think f4 might not be the right response necessarily. There might be stronger, although that seems reasonable as well. G5 might be good as well, with f4 next. You can take time here. So black wanted to keep the dark square grip. He plays at h6. Rook h1. There's a downside. hg is now threatened. So black still reinforces this structure. Rook g8. So he's forfeited castling rights on the king side. hg, hg. Now an interesting move. Rook h3 is played, so this allows potentially if this queen could move one day with pressure over here, but at the moment, and it protects f3 of course, so queen h2 will be a battery down here and still looking at the center from over there. So we see rook b8, knight d4, b4. It looks like a fairly standard sort of move to play, but in this position white plays knight a4 here, and sometimes this knight could be a target. Is it a target here? Knight f6, b3, bishop d7, looking at that, but what about the a6 pawn? Does white dare take on a6? Well, let's see. If he plays knight b2 instead, black might be okay here with d5 apparently. d5 hits at e4, and this could be unpleasant. c3 looks weakened. You know, if ed knight takes, that looks unpleasant immediately. So actually, white played bishop takes a6 here, not minding double pawns if black's going to take on a4. But black plays d5 now. Okay, so d5 here. But now queen h2 is played, pinning the knight for a moment. Bishop d6 unpinning. And now we see queen e2. So what was the point of that? Did it waste time? Well, actually f6 has been subtly weakened for a tempo gain here across this rank. See that bishop on d6? Maybe it was better on e7. We're about to see something about that. Queen a5. In this position, the bishop's already protected. We now see rook h6. So yes, looking at this 6th rank, the king comes to protect. But now e takes d5. Things are really livened up here. What on earth is going on now? Well, if knight takes d5, can you see what white can play in this position, which is unpleasant for black, to say the least? In the game, something else was played. So why wasn't knight takes d5 played? Hello, by the way, on YouTube stream, a prepper from Moscow and Costas Gate 1 from Cyprus. By the way, Costas Gate 1, my parents are both from Cyprus originally, so yeah, hi there. How is Cyprus? Is it very hot today? So white's play here. What would white play in this position after knight takes d5? Any ideas? Black's potentially threatening bishop takes a4 and knight c3 check. Very unpleasant. So white's got to react quickly here. That's a clue. Okay, so knight, yeah, someone's guessed it, I think. In this position, apparently knight f5. Okay, so trying to quickly strike at that d5. If king f8, then actually, okay, this is actually strong. Rook takes d5, hitting the queen. Knight takes d6. If here, bishop c5, ouch. So knight f5 check would be strong. If takes here, rook takes d6. Sorry, not rook takes d5. The queen's on that. Rook takes d6 is strong. Takes here, bishop c5 check is very, very strong. Saying that here, it's all falling to bits. Yeah. So black dare not play knight takes d5 here. So Mamedyarov, he's in big trouble now in this position at move 26. Very big trouble. He plays bishop takes a4. And white ignores this. Well, if white takes here, as I mentioned, this c3 square is pretty nasty. And here, this isn't working so well. E takes because we've got this protected, totally different position. It's winning for black actually. So white in this position doesn't recapture here. What does white play in this position? Very sharp positions. So white play here. Black's just taken on at e4. Let's see that again. E takes d5. Bishop takes a4 has just been played. So what would you play here with white? What's the best move, do you think? This game is Dominguez Perelenia, a 2760 against Mamedyarov, Shakmir Mamedyarov, in round 7 of the Olympiad. So it was a battle of the heavyweights, both players over 2700, and a very, very attacking Sicilian defence game. So after bishop takes a4, what would you play here with white? I think time is of the essence in these positions. Okay, so it's been mentioned knight f5 again. I'm not sure knight f5 is as effective here. I'm not entirely sure it's effective. Let's just check that. Knight f5 check. I think black just takes, and there's no big deal here. There's no fireworks being set off, I'm afraid. None at all. It's pretty safe for black there. Knight c6 is harmless, I think. Just bishop takes. So, but there is a move which embarrasses black severely in this position. Okay, I think I'm going to show you. Just d takes e6 actually threatens the menacing knight f5 check, because we've got that pressure on d6. So knight f5 check is a menace here. So f takes e6, and now taking on a4. Big difference, big difference here in position. So here knight d5 in this position looks to be threatening knight c3 check. Looks actually quite scary, because look, we got this rook there as well. Isn't this terrifying? Wow. It's oh wow, what a difference. Oh, this is amazing. What a difference that d takes e6 can make to the whole position. There's a vulnerability here that can be exposed by white. So black's about to deliver this crushing knight c3 check in this position. Doesn't it look ridiculous that white's allowed this knight d5, seemingly very powerful move? But, you know, this e6 is a bit weak. And you might think, hold on a sec, can we not just play rook takes e6? Well, actually this might fly as well with accurate play here. In fact, it seems as though bishop c4, this is hairy. I mean, it seems as though this idea is plausible. Say knight takes e2, rook takes e5 is check. And we get the queen back with advantage. So it seems as though that actually might be plausible, rook takes e6. But actually in the game we see something even more crushing. The most incisive move is played knight c6 check. Okay. And black actually, remember black's threatening this check to win the queen here. So black took this. But now, can you see what white played in this position? If I give you 20 seconds here. So this is a really, really razor sharp game. White to play in this position. What would you play here with white? So what was the point of this knight c6 check? Any ideas? Very, very sharp game, isn't it? All right, we've got a few ideas. No, the crushing thing is bishop takes g5, check, unleashing coordination on e6. This dare not be taken if rook takes g5, queen takes e6 check. And this is a forced mate for black. Queen takes d6, queen e6. We can play check. Check here. Check. It's going to be a mate with whatever black does. So it's a way to get to black's king, really. Once e6 drops there, it's devastating. So bishop takes g5. Black tries to evacuate with king f8. But then even now, queen takes e6 is absolutely crushing. Black resigned here. It's all falling to bits. If knight c3 check, king here, white has got multiple threats. Queen takes rook f6 check as well. So say for sake of argument, bishop moves, rook f6 check. Rook f7 is going to be leading to mate. So it seems, although black's pieces are not really onto white's king just yet, every single tempo is critical. And in this really strange tactical scenario, these double pawns are actually an asset because it's just makes it one move away to get contact with white's king. So it's the first contact, isn't it? Principle, getting to the opponent's king before your king is got at, and these pawns actually help a little bit king safety, strangely. But to play like this, both players must love tactical complications. I think. I mean, this game is just crazy, isn't it? If we just rewind this, I mean, the subtleties as well of drawing the bishop here to what seems to be an attractive square with tempo. I mean, if you just look at this game after bishop takes a6, d5, if queen e2 had been played here, I mean, black's just crumbling white's center. But the fact, queen h2, if d takes here, let's look at some subtleties. Rook h8 was threatened. We get in contact with black's king. That was the idea. Rook h8 here. And this is very, very troublesome. This position here is very, very bad. So very, very, it's kind of a double attack move, threatening rook h8 as well. And drawing the bishop there, we saw an important tempo gain for rook h6 later. And it seems, in this position, I mean, let's try this again. D takes e4, knight b5 apparently. This is good because we're on the bishop. It's also a tactical target. Very sharp tactics here. So we saw actually queen a5 and then this rook h6. And once black's king was in the center, this knight being able to go to f5 is a crucial concept. Forget about the double pawns or bishop a4. This knight coming to f5 was an absolutely crucial tactical concept here for knight f5 to be so dangerous because we're still on that d6. So it's wonderful tactical stuff where every tempo is absolutely crucial because black's threatening to fork and win the queen. So here, white's playing like this. The engine perspective gives +9 on knight c6 check. This is +9. This is the most incisive move. Knight c6 check. If the king had gone somewhere, then I think we just take the queen and allow this check. And this position here is very, very good for white, this check here. Actually, we've got this covered. This is loose. This is a nightmare for black. He's losing lots of material. In fact, we just take here plus 11. So yeah, very, very tactical game from both sides. I think black played in a very uncompromising manner from early on in this game with this g5 business. But yeah, this rook h3, this sort of stuff to aim for rook h8, because the pieces are not really connected to that rook here. So rook h8 is a good idea. I mean, rook h3 supporting f3 as well. I mean, it's quite beautiful. If you look at the logic of this game, the tactical logic, it's quite beautiful. So okay, let's go on to another game. Which I find, actually there's 3 in a row that I found kind of weird hack attack games. I don't know if the players in the venue fed off each other looking around for these games. But yeah, these are quite carnivorous games that I'm about to show you. So this was one of them. Now here's another. Now David Navara, a 27-16, playing against Grischuk, Alexander Grischuk. So knight f3, c4, e4, so transposing into a Sicilian defence again. So we get great fun from the Sicilian defence. So what happens in this one? Knight c3, a6, we see h3, okay, e6, g4 from David Navara. So h6, bishop g2, seems a quiet start, doesn't it? Bishop e7, bishop e3, and now f4, aggressive looking. Knight d7, white castles, knight takes d4, queen takes, black castles, queen d2, rook b8, rook a1, b5. White plays knight e2, so it doesn't bother with a3. This knight can actually come here to support the e4 pawn. Queen c7, f5, doesn't mind about the e5 square being weakened. Knight f6, knight g3, supporting that e4 a bit more. Rook e8, bishop d4. I think this immediately threatens something horrible. Is on the cards here, like taking and maybe an exchange sack or something. So black takes this opportunity here to play e5, and the bishop drops back, looking as though that might be a tempting treat. Bishop takes h6, but is it? Black just calmly plays bishop b7 as though this is unsound. Bishop takes h6 as though that's unsound. Interesting. Do you think this is sound? If intuitively I was to ask, bishop takes h6 here against Alexander Grischuk, who's 2795, would you believe him or not? Would you take on h6 here? What would you do here? Have any of you seen this game? So bishop takes h6, is that sound or not? What do you think? Would you play it? Yes or no? You see, I found this slightly fascinating, this game, because actually I think it would be very, very difficult to calculate a forced mate or anything based on bishop takes h6. What is more apparent if you knock out both these pawns is that white's pawns would gain in importance. Okay, and it is played. Bishop takes h6 is played, and so Concept 221, you're wrong here, by the way, because the queen is exerting pressure on f6. So there's no bishop f8 in this position. Okay, you can't play bishop f8, but you can play knight h7. Knight h7 was played. Apparently this might be an inaccuracy. Knight h7 looks lucrative because bishop g5 to win the queen is now threatened. Apparently d5 might be good. The engine's suggesting at a certain depth d5 here. I don't know what happens here. G5 check or bishop f8 here is interesting. If takes here, there's bishop g7 winning the queen. But white can play queen h4 here, and this is still dangerous for black. It's the pawns, actually. But let's go back to the game. In the game, okay, d5 wasn't played. Grischuk played knight h7, so clearly threatening bishop g5, right? So f6 was played. And we have bishop f8. And we have now queen h5. And the question is, it's not about mating the black king. And this is the great thing. This is the great thing about David Navara. I think it makes him quite dangerous. He considers this position, a piece down, as a long-term piece sacrifice. And it seems that white's pawns are destined for great things. In particular, the g-pawn destined to crash through with g5, g6. Also, if you consider h4, then that would facilitate bishop h3 to f5, and we're on this. This is a disconnect for black's position. The defense is on the queen side to help the king. So a very, very dangerous position for black. He tries check, king h2, queen e3, the queen coming to the rescue on the dark squares, you might think, with queen g5 coming up next. That stopped with h4, seemingly allowing the queens to be exchanged off. Is that the end of the story? No, it's not the end of the story. White just simply takes and plays g5. And now, in this position, can you see what white plays? And he's perfectly okay with the advantage here, with this next move. What does white play in this position at move 28? White to play. What would you play here? Yeah, just g6. It guarantees white an advantage. He's winning his piece back. Now, before getting into the rest of the game here, well, in fact, okay, okay, let's carry on with the game. Bishop h6 was played, and here, even stronger than this, I mean, this is okay, but actually, even stronger than taking immediately, knight f5 was played. Bishop f4 check, and this is just snapped off, because if e takes, black gets mated with check. And wherever the king goes, it's mate. g7, mate. g7, mate. So rook takes f4. We see knight takes f6. White's just doing fantastically well here. After takes, knight takes d6 check. It's +5 nearly, this position. +3, doesn't matter. It's totally winning. He's got basically 2 extra pawns. So we can quickly see the rest of the game. It's 2 extra pawns, but I want to rewind back. Okay, Grischuk resigned here. Move 40, he resigns. Was this whole thing sound? Can we just go back? Knight g3, bishop d4, e5, bishop e3, bishop b7 was played. Okay? So we have this bishop takes h6. In this position, actually, the engine suggests d5 is slightly interesting, but queen takes h6. How do you improve for black? Well, what I mentioned originally was this d5. There's also another line I analysed earlier with engine help. There's a check. Okay, queen takes c2. This doesn't really help, apparently. What can happen here is, for example, check, check, f6, queen h5, and we get a slow grinding attack here. Imagine the queen is not going to exchange off here on h6. You get this slow grinding attack where this is now threatened for bishop f5. So black plays bishop c8 to stop bishop h3. Knight f5. So bishop h3 on the cards, stuff like that. The attack can just build up. I just wanted to see how the attack could concretely build up a piece down here. But basically, white times g6. Okay, white builds up for g6, and this is fine. Black's not able to do much about this g6 coming up. G6 here might not be crushing. This might be okay. It has to be exactly the right time. So bishop h3 first takes. Now g6 in this position takes queen g6, threatening mate, because that bishop's not protecting there. And apparently this just crashes through. This sort of attack crashes through. We're threatening mate. So I don't know what to think about this. It just, if we go back here, this is a dangerous position. Funny enough, it looks like a dangerous position, but it's not that. I don't know. The engine suggestion is actually d5, as I mentioned, d5. So that might be the best response. Okay, so if g5, we I don't know. It's tricky. So worth a punt, and it got its rewards. So David Navara won that game. Fascinating game, tactical. So I've got another interesting game, a bit like those two. Whoops. Right, Smirin against Batulga Namkai was another fantastic Sicilian defence. So Sicilian defence, I hope everyone's still awake. Hi there. So knight f3, knight c6, open Sicilian, and it was an accelerated dragon. So Batulga Namkai is a 2-4-1-1 playing black against Smirin 2-6-5-6 Ilya Smirin. So it's an accelerated dragon. Knight takes, queen takes, d6. Okay, and now we see queen e3. Let's get past the opening for a moment. f4. Okay. b3. Okay, bishop f3. And now we get this e5, which is giving a permanent liability of the d5 square. I don't know, was this e5 necessary? The engine suggests e6 actually, or b6. It seems like a massive responsibility on black's position for this d5 square after this. And the engine immediately suggests a big advantage for white, well, significant advantage for white, nearly 1 unit or more. So f5, it just looks like a terrible bind on d6. So king h8, bishop e2, g takes, as though black's going to use this g file optimistically. If e takes f5, does that dream come true? Maybe the dream comes true because black plays bishop f6 and might follow with rook g8 later, and that bishop would actually be quite good. But white actually took with the rook. Okay, so keeping that bishop locked out of g2 and the diagonal a bit. And also f7 is an issue. Okay, so bishop d7, rook f2. Black plays f5 now. But he still has some light square weaknesses. E takes, rook takes. White just takes the rooks off, rook f1. And he's got that nice d5 square. Knight e6. Now to weaken the light squares, bishop d3. So trying to get rid of these bishops. Black took on d3 here. Queen takes. Okay, so this looks very nice compared to that at the moment. Knight c5, queen h3. White's potentially coming down with rook f7, and then knight f6 will be good for h7. Queen c8, challenging the queen. So rook f5 now. Threatening knight b6 actually, if black doesn't do anything about that. Rook a6 looks a bit awkward. Bishop e3. e4. And actually, this position, apparently this is very, very difficult for black already. This position here is very, very difficult already. So e4, we see queen g4 here, queen g8, which loses outright, apparently. This apparently just loses in this position. It wasn't played, but knight e7 apparently is absolutely crushing. If the queen moves here, then rook g5, we're on this, is pretty nasty. If it takes here, takes, check, check, mate. That wasn't played. Knight e7 wasn't played. Rook h5 was played. Still, white's got a massive grip on the position. Bishop e5. Queen f5. Knight e6. Knight e7, trying to drag the queen away from h7. And this is horrendous because now, if queen g7, well, it's a bit similar to the game actually. Can you see what would happen if queen g7? Well, I'll show you the game continuation. You can guess. Knight d4. What does white play in this position? Which was a knockout below. So white to play here. What would you play here with white? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now. The final move of the game at move 33. So white's play. So Enyas 2656, Batulga, Namcake Batulga 2411. So attack the queen. Oh, actually, you guys are right. There's two winning moves at least. Knight g6 apparently is winning as well as what was played. Knight g6 wins. If king g7, bishop h6 is mate. Also, this wins what was played. Rook takes h7 because of queen f8 mating. Okay, yeah, I think black asked for it a little bit in this game with just intuitively. You could say that black asked for it with e5, but I guess he tried for some, potential g-file action, which didn't materialize. So I think this would have been, apparently the difference between e takes and rook takes is gigantic. This is almost equal. It will justify black's concept totally. Rook g8. So don't do this. E takes f5 in this sort of position. You'll get coordination of black's pieces. But rook takes f5, it kept the light square control and it stopped this coordination. So that worked out a lot better for white. White's basically doing what you do against the Sveshnikov, getting rid of the light square bishops, trying to play on the light squares. And it was very, very difficult for black to defend this. Okay, let's go on to another game. I think this is the last game I want to show you. No, it's not actually. Oh dear. This might go on a bit. So let's see. Wei Yi, a 2638, was playing against Alexandra Injik, a 2539. I thought this was quite interesting. E4 d6, d4 knight f6, and we see this system with a quick e5. I've forgotten what it's called. Who knows what it's called? This system. I've forgotten for the moment. E5. Anyway, so inviting the exchange of queens. White doesn't really want to do that. White plays knight f3, keeping tension. Knight bd7, bishop c4. And you'll see this is actually a very, very good bishop on this diagonal actually here. Bishop e7, both sides castle. Rook e1, c6, a4, a5. The bishop drops back. So that pinning that pawn important. Keep the pawn pinned. h3, b6, bishop g5, h6. With h6 being played, actually a knight on f5 later is more significant because g6 is going to be harder to achieve. Something to bear in mind. Bishop h4, rook e8, bishop g3, eyeing basically that queen as well, diagonal. Bishop a6, and you see this knight can actually, it doesn't have to be this knight, it can be this one, just like this, quite quick. Knight h4 to go into the f5 square. And with this bishop over here, it's not really challenging the f5 square. g6, we just take that, we've got that pin on f7. So knight f8, knight f5, knight g6, h4, threatening to chase that knight back and do something horrible like d5 later as well. Could be good for light squares, to attack the light squares. Black plays actually in this position h5, and white now does something quite clever actually. Queen d2 is played with a very cunning idea actually. Black took on d4 here. Now queen takes d4 would justify this knight being here. It could jump into e5, and black's position doesn't seem totally unreasonable. Bishop f8 later doesn't seem totally unreasonable. Can you guess what white played in this position though? After e takes d4, white's play here, and it actually secures a big advantage. So a very, very important move to bear in mind for your own games. Very, very important, it seems, this concept, this tactical concept. So white's play here, what would you play in this position? I give you 20 seconds starting from now. Oh yes, the lion. Someone says the lion, this variation, the lion, the ham variation. I think you're both right somehow. This opening that black played. I know the old Indian usually comes when there's from D pawn openings. The old Indian, when white's playing c4, you get old Indian. But I think for e4, it's like the lion. So yeah, very important it seems here to get this right, this position. Yes, so a couple of you have mentioned, yes, queen g5. This old pin is reignited. Queen takes g6 is on the cards. That's kind of justifying this piece and this piece. If we took if we did this, we're actually justifying this piece to come here and potentially this piece to reinforce e5. But the way we play this here, this is very dangerous for black. If d takes c3, this is just wipeout time. Queen takes g6, threatening mate, and check. It's wipeout. Yeah, we'll not avoid that. So queen g5, very, very dangerous. So Alexander Injik in trouble here. Knight d5 was played, hitting the queen. Now white just played knight takes d5, hitting the queen in return. So c takes d5, queen takes h5 here, Fascinating. Fascinating. Queen takes h5. Well, there's no pin on f7 here, so you can't take this. So queen takes h5. Bishop c4. White's better here now. White plays bishop takes c4. Queen takes. And another strong move indeed. Queen g4, simply threatening h5. Go on, that g7. Bishop f6 is played. And this pawn is now weak. That's taken. Ouch. Queen takes c2, winning the exchange. Knight takes e8. E takes d5. Exchange of rooks will be welcome. Rook ac1. Queen b3. d6. Strong pass pawn. Knight f8. Rook c8. Queen takes a4. Rooks come off. d7. So now rook e8 is on the cards. Just blocked the queen from e8. Knight e6. And white continues nicely here. So white's play here just crashes through. Rook takes e6. If f takes, then this is unpleasant to say the least. Check, just winning the bishop. I think we can safely just take this. There's no check or anything. It's not major. So in the game, actually, black tried queen takes d7. It doesn't really work. Rook e4, protecting the queen. And after f5, now rook takes d4, counter-attacking the queen. And black resigned here. So an important point here about this game is you see that lovely bishop tucked on a2 played a crucial role to a very thematic tactical idea. Well, it seems to be a thematic tactical idea. We got the knight. If we got the knight to f5, this queen d2 here to just park the queen over here. And you might think, well, should black have played h5? Is this a bit dodgy? Actually, yeah, I think this is a little bit dodgy. Because actually, even queen c1 here, this would still work here. Queen g5. Just to get to that g5 square. Instead of h6, let's imagine bishop f8. I think white could play differently now. d5. Try and weaken these light squares. If c takes, knight takes, it's a nice light square grip. If nothing else, this is still a nice position. Okay, but in the game, yeah, it's pretty horrible after this position. After queen g5, this is horrible for black now. Okay, I think there is one more game. Which was I thought quite interesting. Ding Liren on the Chinese team. So he was playing black against Milos Perunovic at 2602, and Ding Liren chooses the Caro-Kann. Okay, so the Caro-Kann advanced variation plays bishop f5, knight d2, e6, knight b3, knight d7, knight f3. Knight e7, bishop e2, and yeah, I think black plays a very neat game here. He now plays bishop g4, so he gives himself the f5 square for this knight. White castled, now knight f5. White plays h3. Okay, does the light square bishop mean much here? Black took on f3, and actually, black now plays an interesting move, g6, and the idea is actually to play h5. Funny enough, it supports h5 without losing the h5 pawn. So after rook e1, h5, And it seems this is quite an interesting position here. This is, you know, not much of an advantage apparently for white, technically from an engine point of view. And black solved the piece congestion issues somewhat. So it seems a reasonable position. Bishop e2, f6, and it looks as though this f file could be fun as well. E takes, queen takes, c4, and now black castles queenside. So if you know, black had gone to castle on the king side, I think this should be okay as well. C takes, or is it? Bishop b5. I think white's better here somehow. This has got a different feel to it. Well, losing the piece for a start. So anyway, so black went castle queenside here in this line. And we see c takes d5, e takes d5, bishop f4. So this looks a little bit dangerous. But now bishop b4 is played. And the bishop can always come back to challenge, actually, because the knight and queen are on here. So bishop d2, the bishop actually comes back here. And already this is uncomfortable now for white. This d pawn for a start is under fire as well. This is very, very uncomfortable position. If, for example, if white plays bishop e3, then this is almost losing by force. Knight takes, queen g5. We're coming on these dark squares. Horrible. So white plays rook c1, just offering the d pawn here. I think it might not be possible to take it in this position. If knight takes in this position, bishop c3, this is okay for white. This is actually good for white. We've got skewer time. Okay, so not taking the d pawn at the moment. Rook h f8, looking at f2 potentially. Rook f1. Now it's taken. Knight takes d4, taken here. Free pawn in the center. Knight takes, queen takes. Bishop e3, queen e5, threatening mate. Forget about this pawn, threatening mate. g3, this pawn's attacked. Takes time to protect that, king b8. Black is now threatening all sorts of things though. h4 is played, because black is also potentially going to play h4 in this. Well, there's numerous ideas here. Looks at that. I mean, h4 looks potentially tempting. We see white playing h4. Rook de8. With now d4 is on the cards just to win this bishop. So bishop d3 is played. Queen e6. Now unleashes bishop takes g3 as a threat because of queen takes e3 after. Rook e1 trying to protect e3. Queen f6 now, with a different threat which was missed by white. Totally, it seems. White should try and play queen d2 to keep this solid, but white blunders here with queen a4. Can you see what Ding Liren plays in this position? So Ding Liren is a 2-7-4-2. So okay, he spots something very, very good here. What does black play in this position? Can you spot what black plays? Black to play and win. Final move of the game. White's looking at a7, obviously. But what does black play? I don't know, yeah, I don't know. It made it look easy, didn't he? Just rook takes e3 and white resigned. It's horrible, isn't it? It's horrible. If takes here, we just lose the rook. You know, white loses the rook. It's horrible. If he takes like this, it's not much better. So mate in 4. Check. check. Apparently this is a mate in 4. Whatever happens, check and mate. So it's a very, very good line, how it seems to be played in this game with castling queenside. Because before, I mean, I've covered games from the white perspective, where, you know, sometimes black has difficulty in this line because these pieces are kind of congested. But it seems this is an example where black is prepared to give up the light square bishop and prepared to castle queenside later. So I think quite exotic play, solving all of the major problems in this line, and even getting, you know, play on the F file later. So, you know, it seems very, very excitingly played by black to get this, what seems to be an easy looking win, but really, you know, there's a lot of good ideas there. I think white's dark square is just incredibly vulnerable here all the time. I mean, the knockout blow is on a dark square. Rook takes e3. So yeah, that was my selection of games for this week. I hope you got something out of that. So comments or questions on YouTube, and see you next week about the same time. Okay. So thanks very much.